Did you know that 7 million people have tried to start online businesses since the rise of remote work? But 99% of them get it wrong by following the same path as everyone else, drowning in competition until their profits disappear. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I built a 7-figure Amazon business while traveling the world from Thailand to Europe to Mexico without being tied to any one specific place. And by the end, you're going to know all of the tips and tricks which allowed me to build that business remotely for Amazon FBA without having to stress about another 9-to-5 travel. I want to walk you through all the biggest things that you need to know step by step that's going to support you. If you don't do the first one, it means 75% of your orders are going to be cancelled whilst you're overseas. The second one might surprise you, and the third is what makes or breaks your ability to scale. Let's talk about the tech stack. Now, you already know the standard tools that everyone talks about. SellerAmp for doing your calculations, Keeper for helping you with more deal analysis and historical, and some kind of repricing software like SellerSnap. That's what we use. Now, these are all foundational software, but beyond that, there are a couple of hidden pitfalls that can seriously derail your business if you don't address them. When I first started purchasing inventory in the USA, an insane 50 to 75% of all of the orders we made were cancelled. The smaller problem was mismatched billing and shipping addresses, but we got that shipped. The real problem was that we were buying in the US with an IP address from, guess where? Asia. I was in Thailand at the time. Now that is an instant red flag for suppliers. The immediate result you're thinking about is, hey, don't worry, I'm going to use a VPN. But guess what? You can go on any is my IP address website when you're loaded into a VPN connection, and it will tell you that you are currently on a VPN connection. So if the website knows that you're on a VPN connection, then the suppliers know you're on a VPN connection. And so therefore, they still cancel your orders. Now, the proper workaround here is not to use a generic VPN. It's to get a private residential IP address, which when you go to what is my IP address, it actually says this is your IP, but it says nothing about you being on a VPN. This makes your online presence to a retailer look completely legit, and you look like you are in the USA. This one change made us go from 75% order cancellation to below 10%. The next problem we faced was communication. If you're abroad, for example, I was in Thailand, getting a US SIM is going to be impractical or even unreliable. Even Google has remote services that you can use, but they require you to be back in the US once every 3 months. So that didn't really work for me either. Now, the service we use, I think is called Zadama. Now, this service is a virtual US telephone number, and it lets you send and receive text messages and obviously make calls, which makes you look like you're stateside, which is absolutely brilliant. Now, one top tip I will share with this is that sometimes what you may find is that you can't use those virtual telephone numbers with some suppliers. Some people detect them. But what we did find, if we bought 2 or 3 numbers and tested them, one of them would actually work. So some of the numbers can be detected, some of them can't. That's a really good workaround. Now, the next problem we ran into is I'm in Thailand, but I wanted to start doing wholesale orders. And the problem is that I needed to project a level of credibility. Buyers or suppliers wanted a number to call, and they expected someone on the other end to answer. Obviously, I'm half asleep, halfway around the world in Thailand. What was the solution? A virtual answering service that picks up calls, represents the business professionally, and makes sure that no contact goes unanswered. At a fundamental level, whenever I'm asleep, they answer the call and say, I'm really sorry, Tom's in a meeting right now. I'll get him to call you back when he's out. Obviously, a couple of hours later, when I wake up, I'd get the email and I would return the call. These little moves separate you from looking like a side hustle to being a professional business. After you've nailed down the tech stack, the next big issue that we found isn't really purchasing itself, it's logistics, and especially finding a good warehouse or prep center. Choosing the right prep center is critical. Now, my personal rule, and we've found a lot, and unfortunately, this is where it came from, is I avoid all brand new prep centers. I want a prep center that's been around at least a full year, so I know that they've understood the seasonality and are not just figuring out things as they go. Now, the top priority for me when looking at prep centers is communication. When you're overseas, maybe working across different time zones, poor communication quickly becomes a nightmare. Now, I don't ever want to have to be in the situation where I need to fly to the US just to get clarity on my stock situation. That's not an option. Now, a couple of the questions that I asked, do they work off Google Sheets, or what's their process in place, and can I see a demonstration of it? I want to see how clear that communication looks like. On top of that, do they send photos of stock as it arrives? Now, the more visibility they can provide to me, the easier it's going to be to stay in control. One of my prep centers right now, for example, sends images of everything that comes in by default, which is incredibly useful for identifying orders or unexpected shipments pretty much in real time. Responsiveness is also a key part of what I look for in regards to prep centers, because obviously I don't have much contact time with them. I need for them to be responding. 24 hours between each communication is just too long. Now, on top of that, I prefer to work with, should we say, one individual person who can be my consistent point of contact, who understands me, understand how I work, and we can react quickly. So having account managers in the prep center can be game changing. So my criteria are pretty straightforward. I want strong communication, clear reporting, proven track record, and those are the things that allow me to confidently push thousands, if not millions of dollars of stock through warehouses without any necessary problems. You've got the purchases coming in, you look legitimate, you've got your phone calls set up, and the stock is flowing, which is all fantastic. But the next big challenge you have whilst being abroad or remote in your business is returns and inventory issues. These things are going to happen. Now, sometimes products can't be resold, and maybe suppliers won't take them back. This leads to what's called unfillable inventory, and it's a real headache because it locks up your cash in dead stock that you just can't move. I know sellers with over $100,000 worth of stock sat in a warehouse doing nothing, which could be used to buy new good stock, but they can't because it's all sat there. Now, the best option for you, if you're thinking about this, see if your prep center can shift it for you. Often they'll do it through places like eBay or Facebook Marketplace, but maybe that might not be practical for them, or they don't offer that service. Now, in that case, I would really recommend trying to seek out liquidation centers or maybe other resellers or other prep centers who provide it. They do exist, but generally they're not very well advertised because they get flooded with loads of low quality inquiries with lots of people wanting to get them to give them money for really rubbish goods. They're really only interested in working with larger sellers who do a good volume. But by tapping into your network, you can actually find out who these sellers are or who these connections are, and you can get these accounts set up so that you can liquidate, sell all excess inventory or unfillable inventory that Amazon gets returned. Now, the key part here is you want to be getting that returns address set up quickly. So once you're selling stock, you can then return it from Amazon to the reseller and then obviously recover that money and funnel it back into more profitable inventory. Now, let's dive into a few other areas that you might be concerned about, which I hear a lot of people talking about in forums or in communication, but maybe you don't have to be, or there's some good workarounds. Now, a common concern I hear all the time is whether logging into Seller Central from another country is going to trigger account deactivations or problems, and especially within Seller Central. Now, personally, I have logged into Seller Central from many different countries, and particularly when I've flown from Mexico to Barcelona, to Dubai, then to Thailand, literally in 40 hours, I have logged into Seller Central in every single one of them and never had a single problem. Now, the one thing which I will say is there are a couple of important rules that I do follow. Number one, whenever in cafes or in any public place, I always use a VPN to access Seller Central. Why? I want to just make sure that Amazon sees two IP addresses usually for me. One is my home address, and then two is always the same VPN connection. Now, Amazon knows it's a VPN connection, but it is just that. And also as well, I don't want my Seller Central to have an IP address which is going to be linked to maybe a coffee shop that another Amazon seller is in as well. So while I might get a link through a VPN, there's going to be so many IP addresses there, it probably won't matter. But an individual coffee shop with another seller, I want to stay away from that. Now, on top of that, if I'm ever updating any sensitive information, let's call it bank accounts or credit card details, I will make sure I only ever do that from my regular home IP address without the VPN. Now, you can probably try and do this with the VPN if you want, but I have seen that triggers a lot more security and a lot more problems. So I generally try to wait until I get home or from a regular IP address I use to make those changes. And that just means that I get less problems when trying to change banking details, because obviously that looks like fraud. Now, when it comes to working with banking outside of Amazon, this also hasn't posed a single issue for me at all. Now, one hiccup we have actually experienced, and I mentioned it earlier, is with virtual telephone numbers. Some of them work fine, others don't. For example, Chase, who we've used, could be Wise, it could even be Mercury, even some UK banks. They just don't like some of the numbers. They won't send a two-factor authentication, so use the authentication apps. But if you can, try and buy a couple of numbers from Zamdar, I think it's called, and then use trial and error to figure out which ones that they will actually send messages to. Once one of them will send a message, you'll find all of them will send messages to that one number. So buy a couple of numbers, test them. When one works, cancel the other ones and just keep using that one number. Now, as for credit cards or debit cards, how does that work while you're away? The big thing that we found that makes it a lot easier is by getting a residential IP address, which is very close or in the same state, at least, to the billing address of the card. Now, say, for example, if your card is Delaware, that's where your billing address is. Ideally, you want an IP address in Delaware. If you're going to try from Thailand, that's just going to set you up for trouble. Now, the short answer is using again that residential VPN, which is going to allow you to tunnel into an address in Delaware, which is going to avoid most headaches. Now, I've talked about some of the problems and how we've overcome them, but let's talk about some of the advantages. And hey, how's life? Of course, people always imagine the classic laptop on the beach scenario. But honestly, it's not all that practical. Sand in your laptop, sand in your feet, in your shoes, trying to work while sweating under the sun is no fun. Now, personally, I've never done it, but by the pool, that's another idea. That's the sweet spot. I've done that many times in countries like Vietnam and Thailand and Bali. There's usually a great table, you can get great service and also nice atmosphere. You can do some work for a few hours, jump in the pool, get a refresh, and then carry on. The perfect balance, and I love doing that many, many times. Now, beyond the lifestyle factors, one of the real benefits to being location independent is the ability to go meet your suppliers. Most sellers never even bother, even when their suppliers are close by. Yet, meeting them face to face can completely change the way you do business. Building real connections, most people don't do this, but it has a real opportunity to give you better pricing and better discounts and negotiations with what's going on. And then there's another bonus which people don't understand. If you live in a country like Thailand, for example, or so most of the time there, then if you were to go fly back to the US to go meet your supplier, all of a sudden it's now a business trip. So that flight can be attributed towards that, even the hotels as well. I'm not an accountant. Do speak to your accountant. Could be something that you get tax deductible. It's win-win. Now, running an Amazon business remotely comes with challenges, lessons, and plenty of wins along the way. But what I share today is just the beginning. I've also recorded a video that dives deeper into the key lessons I've learned over the last 5 years of selling on Amazon. Plus, it shows all the costly mistakes that I've made that you want to avoid. I'll put a link around here. Check it out. And that's going to be a great video to help you in your business. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Thank you very much.